Yeah, cold nights I must confess, yeah. There's something in my soul that kept telling me to hold on. Even when the world turned its back on me, I knew deep inside that I wasn't meant to be bad.
Welcome to When I Was Homeless, a podcast that shares real stories of resilience and hope. I'm your host, Gabby Cunningham. Today we have a special guest, Jamie, who bravely shares her journey of becoming homeless after a mental health crisis and losing her job. Jamie's story is a powerful reminder that homelessness can happen to anyone, and that support and compassion are crucial during difficult times. Join us for an honest and insightful conversation that will challenge your perceptions and inspire you to make a difference. Good afternoon, Jamie. Thank you for joining us here on When I Was Homeless. And I wanted to take a few moments to let you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are and why you're here.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to get to share my story. I live in Oklahoma, and I have been homeless for 3 months. So up until May, I had been a mental health therapist. I have been working in the crisis field and the substance use field for the last 4 years, and had never really envisioned myself on the other side of things. I had, I would say, decent mental health. I had access to therapists. I was doing a good job of taking care of myself, taking care of my daughter, my grandson. And then all of a sudden in May of this year, I had a mental health crisis that I didn't see coming, where I had an interrupted suicide attempt and ended up being hospitalized. And then on the heels of that was depression, severe depression, and getting diagnosed with severe depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, and ADHD. It was a life-changing event that resulted in me needing to take extended leave from work that was unpaid. And so ended up eventually losing my home that way, because I had to take leave for an outpatient program, leave for inpatient treatment, and then still continuing treatment on an outpatient basis now, but just haven't gotten back to that point where I am well enough to work. So at the same time, I was diagnosed with a chronic illness. It's postural orthostatic hypotension, tachycardia syndrome, POTS for short. And all of that combined just made it to where I wasn't able to work. And so I lost my house. My daughter went to live with her dad in Tennessee. I decided at that point that the best situation for me was going to be to live in my car. So I moved all of my stuff, what I couldn't sell, I moved into storage and then moved into my car. And that's where I currently live. I'm still in the middle of homelessness. I'm still in the process of trying to get back to where I was a year ago. It's been an adventure, I would say. I don't view it completely as a negative. I don't view homelessness as like a death sentence, I view homelessness as something for me that's necessary for this period of my life. It's kind of just a transition. And eventually I'll be in a different space again. But for now, this is where I'm at.
I always tell people this is a transitory state. It's not forever. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I have a pretty good setup in my car. It's actually very comfortable. I am very blessed to have resources around me and support. I have my family. I stayed in the town where my family lives. So I have them to lean on for, if I get bored and need a place to go during the day, or if I need a shower. I also have a wonderful friend who bought me like a year-long Planet Fitness subscription so that I could go and take showers there as well and use their facilities, get massages and things like that. So I've had people who have been so supportive and so helpful to me on this journey. It's really been kind of eye-opening for me as somebody who really never liked to lean on people for anything really. But I prided myself on being a strong, independent woman and didn't really like to ask for help. But in this season, it's been a season where I've had to ask for help. I've had to pull on those resources that I didn't ever imagine that I would have to.
I love that you have so much support. And I love that you mentioned massages because self-care, especially in a time when we're in transition, especially when we're overcoming mental health and even physical health challenges, it's so important, right?
Yeah.
How are you feeling physically and how are you supporting your recovery from whatever you're going through?
Yeah. So I actually developed a DVT, a deep vein thrombosis blood clot, from the doctors explained it was the way that I was sleeping in my car. So I usually sleep in my sister's driveway. The car is kind of like on an incline and my feet, like when I sleep, they're pointed down and I usually sleep kind of in a fetal position. That was what he said was a recipe for a blood clot. So I did get a blood clot about a week and a half ago. And that's kind of a scary thing to happen. My sister has repercussions from blood clots from a DVT. My dad also has lost his leg to blood clots. So for that to have happened, I was like, oh, just another thing. I joked about it on TikTok. I was like, if you had, having a mental health breakdown, getting a blood clot, what else did I say? Oh, losing my job, becoming homeless on your 2024 bingo card for me. You can yell bingo now.
Oh, no.
I deal with a lot with my sense of humor, but that's how I kind of cope. But at the same time, I was like, oh man, like one more thing on this. This has been just like a crazy year. So I was emotionally probably overwhelmed, I would say, but physically I'm feeling great right now because it's been about a week since I started blood thinners and everything is like it's doing its job so that I can walk a little bit more. Because of my conditioned POTS, can't really walk for very long anyway. But with the blood clot, I wasn't able to hardly walk at all. So I'm back to like how I was before the clot. So that's good. So the first signs that I had the blood clot was like I woke up and I felt like I had a cramp in the night. Like, when you have those cramps at night in your calf and they wake you up and they're terrible, but then the next day you kind of feel sore from them. So It felt like that, but I didn't have a cramp. So I'm like, why does my leg feel like this? And then it continued to get worse over the next 3 days to the point where like I could hardly walk and my leg was a little swollen. The main thing was like when it hurt when I walked and it hurt when it rested. The only thing that relieved it was elevating it. And I think my experience with my dad and my sister, I was like, this is probably what it is. But I was actually, to be honest, I'm not a huge fan like of going to the emergency room. It's one of those things, like, oh, I don't want to like blow this out of proportion, right? Like this is probably just a cramp. that's lasting a little long. But my dad it goes back to having that support system. My dad was like, no, you're going to go to the hospital. So he made me, and I'm glad I listened because he was right. That's exactly what it was. He knew because he'd been there before. I'm very grateful for, I'm grateful that I have people in my life who are looking out for me, who care about me.
For
Sometimes
sure.
sometimes when I'm not as compassionate or, thoughtful towards myself, I have people in my life who are.
You absolutely deserve so much support and so much love. And I'm so thankful that you have that around you.
Thank
Um,
you. It's not, I know that especially in this community, talking about the homeless community, that is a rarity, and I'm
mhm.
aware that it is a rarity and that it's a privilege that I have. I know that that's not the story that everybody has, that there's a lot of people out there in this community who don't have any support at all. I definitely want to say that I recognize that.
That's true. And even those who felt like they had a support system when they were housed, when they're unhoused, it's a rude awakening to see how
Mhm.
little support actually exists for so many people. I'm happy that's not your story. You know my history as a nurse. And so I'm also wondering, how have you modified your sleeping arrangements? Are you staying with your sister? Like, have you changed how you sleep in the car? How are we making sure that you can be healthier going forward?
Absolutely. So, going forward, I have actually changed my head and my foot position. So I flip flop them because, and I'm only parking on flat surfaces now. So, I have flip flopped my head and my feet so that my legs are elevated, and my back and my head are like flat because I'm naturally the way my bed is. It has like a little bit of an incline because of the way my back seat is. I have a Subaru Crosstrek, so I lay the seats down, and then I have some play mats to kind of even it out a little bit, and then over that is my foam, my 4-inch foam mattress topper. Because of the way the seats lay down, there's still like an incline at that part of it where the back seats are. Now I'm sleeping with my head by I guess, the hatch, for lack of a better word,
Yeah.
and with my feet kind of towards the middle. And I also, this is a big one. I also quit vaping because I use nicotine. So that's the biggest life change. So
For you.
thank
For
you.
you. Okay. So we've covered so much in so little time. You're an amazing guest. I do want to take this back to leaving your job back in May and what kind of led to that burnout.
Yeah, so I have worked in the crisis field for about 4 years, and because of that, just like there's a heavy, heavy emotional load in that work. It just it just wore on me, I would say, but it was also a combination of, it wasn't just work, it was also some life factors going into it as well. In a very short period of time, the home that we lived in, they decided that they were going to sell it. And we had been leasing it, and our lease was almost up, but we were going to renew our lease. They decided that, we want to sell it instead of renewing the lease. So we had to hurry up and scramble. We had like 30 days to find a new place to live. That was in April. And then, so we found a place to live, but it was like a huge process. And then there was a lot of things transitioning at work at that time. I've been here in Oklahoma for the most part. I did substance use counseling But when I lived in Nashville, I did about 4 years, almost 4 years of crisis counseling. But they were changing my position here in Oklahoma to be crisis. So with the job change, with having to find an apartment, it was a lot of like external stressors. Um, and that just on May 16th, it kind of all culminated because that was also my mother's birthday, but she's deceased. And May 16th was just a really rough day for me. So I left work and I left to go to lunch. And I was sitting eating lunch and I was just bawling. And I was like, I'm either going to go home or check myself into the hospital because I'm not well right now. So I just didn't go back to work that day. And I called and let my supervisors know. And then that's when I ended up going on FMLA, and it was unpaid FMLA. So it was a really big struggle. I had to rely on community resources and family and friends for that whole period.
When you left work, what exactly happened then? Were you able to get support? Did you just go home? What did that look like for you?
I just went home that day and really just I honestly that day I don't remember much of, but I know that like in the following week my depression spiraled quite a bit leading up to that interrupted suicide attempt. I ended up going to a crisis center, and that was involuntary, but it was good because it made me realize I actually used to work in crisis centers, and it gave me such perspective of the patients that I had been caring for 4 years, in Nashville, working at the crisis center there. I was like, man, it's so weird being on the other side of things. And so eye-opening to things that I missed as a crisis therapist, things that I could have done better here, because now I realize what the client is really struggling with. Like they're here, because against their will. Of course, they're going to be irritable because I was irritable. I was like, I just want to go home. So it gave me a whole new perspective. Also, because I was a crisis therapist, it gave me a unique understanding, I guess, of what my next steps needed to be. I didn't have to rely on any advice from anybody there at the crisis center because I already knew what I needed my next steps to be because I had been on the treatment team before. I knew that I needed a more intensive outpatient program. So that's when I started the 5-week program, and that's how I ended up taking the FMLA because I had to take it for that program.
How long were you in the crisis center?
I was only in the crisis center for 2 days. Then just after I finished my intensive outpatient program, because that was another 5 weeks after that. So close to July or around July, I ended up going inpatient for 5 days at a psychiatric hospital because things kind of deteriorated again. But since then, I haven't had to have that level of intervention. I've got an amazing psychiatrist, amazing therapist, great community mental health team. Can't say enough about community mental health centers. Having worked in them having worked in community mental health centers since 2019, but also now being on the other side as a consumer, can't say enough about them.
I assume they know that you're living in your car. What kind of supports have they given you?
Yeah, so they've been great because I have so much support. There hasn't been, or they haven't felt that there's a need for me to have another level of resources. for intervention, since I have family that if it were to come down to it, it was like -2 degrees outside or something, they know that I would stay with my sister or something like that. Um, so there hasn't been much in the way of intervention when it comes to that. For me, it's been mostly intervention on a mental health level, which I think if we look at statistics, we know that that is one of the biggest contributing factors to homelessness is mental health. So I'm glad they're focusing on the mental health.
Absolutely. So let's move on to you actually living in your car. What other challenges are you seeing on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, the biggest challenge on a day-to-day basis for me is boredom, I would say. Um, there's not a lot that I can do that I used to love to do, like hiking and things like that, because of my POTS condition. So the biggest thing for me is boredom. I need to be more creative in finding solutions for that. And then also just keeping and maintaining the car. I think that when you're living in your car, it's your home, and you're like, okay, I can't, something goes wrong, that this is my home. I have to, it's like, it's not just my car anymore, it's my home. So I need to take care of it. So there's always that fear, that worry that something's going to take your car out, and then
Yeah,
you're not going to have that home. Um, but I would say those are the things that I struggle with. And then finding what the term is stealth camping. So finding some place stealthily to park. Sometimes, like if I'm not able to park, if I'm not in, this in my town with where my sister lives, and I have to be somewhere else, like finding a place to park, finding places to go to the bathroom. those are those are huge, huge issues.
what
And
about food? How are you feeding yourself?
that's a great question. I miss cooking a lot. I used to be, not to toot my own horn, but I will toot toot. I'm a really great cook. I do miss cooking. If I'm not eating with a family member, I will grab something from a convenience store, things like that. That's probably not great for the blood sugar. So don't do that very often.
What about like healthier alternatives? I know you mentioned that you get food assistance from your state and you sometimes eat with your family, and I assume those are healthier options. But what about like salads and things? Do you have any way to keep fresh produce, like a small refrigerator? I know that with many car campers, there are different setups, and some have like little domestic refrigerators that are hooked up to, um, portable generators, the solar generators, the battery operated generators. Do you
Mhm.
have any of those sort of things?
I don't. So I haven't been able to afford anything like that. So because of that, like um my options for fresh food like that are limited. I do have a Coleman camping stove and a little set that I can use to cook fresh food, but it has to be something that I purchased that day at the store. I can't really store anything. It's a little bit of a barrier for me to making fresh food daily. I have access to a refrigerator at my dad's and a refrigerator at my sister's house, though. So that is helpful, but it would be much more helpful to have it actually in my car because I do have to drive using gas and resources at that point to get from one place to another place. I'm able to eat a pretty decent diet because of having access to food at my dad's and my sister's, it would be much more difficult if it was just having to rely on what I could get on a daily basis in my car.
She mentioned you have a TikTok. I would love for you to share with our listeners what that might be and where we can find you on the web to support you now, because we want to raise awareness, but we also want to support wherever we can.
Yes, on TikTok, I'm called Heavy Traveler, just how it's spelled, heavy and traveler put together. I call it my diary because it really is just what's going on in my life, and the good, the bad, and the ugly, but mostly dealt with a sense of humor, because I've learned to really cope is by making things funny. So that's where you can find me on TikTok. There's something for everybody, I like to say, on there. you know, from family drama to what is going on with my car camping right now. I kind of tracked or logged or vlogged, I should say. I vlogged my recent trip that I took. I did a cross-country trip where I went from Oklahoma all the way up to the Pacific Northwest, and then back down the West Coast, and then back home on Route 66. So I vlogged all about that. So that's where you can find me on there.
That sounds amazing. And I wanted to touch on a couple of things that you said. We want to make sure we can line up resources for people who may be listening. What about Social Security? Have you applied? Do you need a lawyer?
I've applied for Social Security by myself, so I am receiving long-term disability through an insurance that I had with my company that I worked for before I was laid off. So I'm covered for 2 years on that. It's for mental health, they have a 2-year term limit, so I will be able to get 60% of my salary and for the next 2 years. And then I'll have to figure something out, but it is required that I apply for Social Security disability while I'm on that. There's no decision on that or anything yet.
So, listeners, if you know someone who is, or if you yourself are a disability attorney, you may want to reach out to Jamie just to help her along the path. Yeah, of course. And I wanted to talk a little bit about family dynamics, because I know how complicated they can be in quote unquote ideal families where everything is normal and pretty even keel. It gets much more complicated when we throw in profound losses and mental health, and everyone has thoughts and ideas and opinions. And I kind of wondered, how are you dealing with that, and what does that look like in your life?
Yeah, so my family dynamics, I would say, have always been messy. So it's not unusual for that to be the case. I think one of the things that that makes it so complicated is we can really, really love, people, but we need to have really strong boundaries with, I should say. The two things can be true at the same time. We can love somebody a lot and need strong boundaries with them. My dad did want me to move in with him when I first became homeless, but that was something I wasn't able to do because of history. Like growing up, there was a lot of yelling and a lot of triggering moments, and resulted in PTSD for me. And I knew I couldn't really be in that situation full time. I can handle it in doses, but I couldn't be in that situation every day. I had to really say, I can't do that. I will come and visit you because I love you fiercely, but I can't just stay here, and also I need, in order for me to feel like I am making any kind of progress in life, I need to feel little independence, and at a time when I was so literally dependent on people to help me pay my bills and everything, having the car be my like freedom and independence space was so important to me, to not be in somebody else's house, in somebody else's space, but to have my own space was really important to me because I was completely out of my comfort zone, accepting help from other people, and I was having to do that. So having that one thing that was mine was important to me. So family dynamics are kind of, they're messy for sure. I had a very complicated relationship with my mother, which is one of the reasons why my breakdown on May 16th was so complicated and difficult, was because I didn't have the best relationship with her. It was her birthday. She's been gone 2 years, and all of that just hit me. And it was messy, and I fell apart.
I am so sorry for your loss. And
Thank you.
I also want to tell you how resilient and powerful and strong you are. I am just actually in awe of you. It takes a very strong person to say no or to have boundaries when you're so vulnerable and when your whole world is crumbling around you. And it seems like that could be a strong foundation. And then you still say, but it's not what's best for me.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I knew that this was not going to make my mental health any better. And that was exactly what needed to get better with my mental health. So I did have to make that choice that was right for me.
Yeah, so much respect. And also that at the beginning of our conversation, you mentioned having severe depression and anxiety and ADHD and all of these comorbid conditions that can even make getting up and, even just brushing your teeth or taking a shower super complicated, super difficult in the most ideal situations, in the most stable situations. And you went across country. That's amazing.
Yeah. I would say I didn't shower very much.
Well,
when I could. But darn it, I got up and went somewhere.
you got up and went somewhere. Yes, you did,
Yeah.
I'm 100% a person that believes in celebrating the small wins,
Yeah.
making small achievable goals, because that's empowering and it's just as important as the large goals, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It really is. So yeah, I just wanted to say that. And now I want to kind of shift to your advocacy and what is it that you want to see going forward? What is your hope for the future?
Oh, my hope for the future is to see more people stand up to the current climate, or the current, I guess the trend really right now is to criminalize homelessness. You see it I know in the 2 states where I've lived in the past, few years, in Oklahoma and in Tennessee. This year, they both passed laws to make it a misdemeanor to sleep in your car, which is insane to me.
Insane.
It's just, they've also made it in Oklahoma. They've made it illegal to camp anywhere outside of a campground, but they've also made it illegal to camp in a campground if you're, or in a state park. I should say, they've made it illegal to camp in a state park unless you're in a campground. So there's so many things like that going on across the country where it's making it more difficult for the marginalized community, the homeless community to be able to live, or even supersede the circumstances that they're in to get to a place where they have stable housing, if that's something they desire, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
because if they're saddled with fines,
Yep.
sometimes even 15 days in jail on some
Yep.
of these charges, then how are they going to be able to, overcome that? It's just adding on to the burden that they have.
Go
If they're
on.
working, missed days at work to go to court and then have to pay the fine, if that's diverting resources that could be used to help go towards something else that they need to take care of. I don't think it's the government's place to tell us where we can and can't sleep, I guess.
It is if they're giving us a place to sleep. Otherwise,
You're right. There, oftentimes the resources that police officers are offering aren't even available yet in some of these states where they've just made it a misdemeanor if
mhm,
they don't accept the help from the officer. And some of the programs aren't even activated or in place for them to get the help that they need. So they can't even take advantage of the resources because there are none.
there are none. There are none.
It's a recipe for failure. The onus is going to be on the person who is homeless. It's setting them up to fail. Yeah.
Um, I
Yeah.
could go on and on about it because
I
it's
know.
it's
I know.
insane.
It's so frustrating, and to feel kind of powerless because of really what's going on. I live in Oklahoma and Tennessee, and they are both very conservative states, and I know from what I understand, Florida is too.
Mhm.
And so I think that even more so in those conservative states, there's a huge struggle because there's that desire to fix quote unquote fix the problem, but not devote any resources to it.
Yeah, it's a them problem instead of
Yeah.
a our problem.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's one of the reasons I do this podcast is because I need people to understand it isn't us problem. It isn't our
Yeah.
problem. It's a community issue.
And it can
And
happen to anybody. It doesn't discriminate, like,
yes,
you know, on a dime, things can turn on a dime, and then all of a sudden, you know, you're in a situation like this where you have to live in your car. You have to make the choice on, what bills to pay. Am I going to keep my car? I can't really pay for my house anymore. So I guess I'm going to keep my car so I don't have to pay for gas, electricity, the other things, or natural gas and electricity, the things that make a house run, all I have to do is pay for my car payment, my insurance, and my gas now,
and here. And what's crazy is your whole thinking shifts to where this becomes a very sustainable idea because what's the alternative, right?
Mhm.
If nothing else, I have my car. If nothing else, I can get in my car and move it someplace else.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So I really appreciate this conversation. You are a breath of fresh air and you are a joy.
Thank you.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with us?
Yes. It really wouldn't be me if I didn't say, if you're listening to this and you're in a situation where you have found yourself living in your car, living on the street, homeless, just keep going, you know, keep going. You may feel like it's the end. There's no hope. And I would be remiss if I didn't say keep going, and also to give the resource of the 988 number if you're feeling like you're just at that point where you kind of have no hope, then give them a call at 988 and they'll be able to help you.
Thank you so much for that, Jamie.
Yeah.
It has been a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you.
You are in my prayers, and
Thank you.
we are going to support you however we can and drive everyone to your TikTok to follow your adventures. And I
Appreciate
can't
that.
wait to bring you back once you're stable or once you have a home. I hope you reach back out, and I would love to chat with you again.
Absolutely. That would be great. It's a pleasure, Gabby. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your time. I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you. You too.
A big thank you to Jamie for courageously sharing her story with us today. To our listeners, please remember that help is available if you or someone you know is struggling with homelessness or mental health challenges. Call 988 for support and resources. Before we go, I want to remind you to download the show notes, discussion questions, worksheet, and resources on our website at www.formybonuschild.org. Just navigate to the top right of our menu and click on podcast. Until next time, this is Gabby Cunningham, encouraging you to lead with empathy because every story matters, including yours.